Zahara nodded, feeling her throat tighten. Mum never talks about him, about Uncle Elijah. I didn't even know he existed until now. All I know is that something happened, something bad. Leona sighed, her expression softening with a sorrow Zahara couldn't place. It was a long time ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Your mother and Elijah were inseparable back then. They were closer than any siblings I've ever known. But life has a way of taking things that seem perfect and tearing them apart. She paused, taking a slow sip of her coffee, as if gathering the strength to continue. Zahara waited, her fingers pressed against the cool ceramic of her mug, willing herself to be patient. Your mother and Elijah were always there for each other. When one had a dream, the other was right behind, cheering them on. But something happened. Leona's voice faltered, as if the weight of the memories still had the power to hurt. A misunderstanding that turned into a rift neither could cross. Your mother felt betrayed, Zahara, in a way that ran deeper than words could heal. And Elijah, he was left with his own pain, his own regrets. They both chose to go their separate ways. Zahara felt a knot form in her stomach. But why? Why didn't they ever try to fix it? All these years, and they've just lived like this, apart and hurting. Sometimes, Leona said, her voice quiet and thoughtful, people hurt each other so deeply that they think it's better to leave the past buried, to protect themselves from the pain of opening up old wounds. Your mother, she has her reasons, I'm sure. But I think in her heart, she's never truly let go. Zahara felt a strange mixture of sadness and determination wash over her. She couldn't imagine carrying such a burden alone, choosing to hide from the very things that had once mattered so deeply. The photograph felt heavier in her hand, a silent testament to all the years of silence and regret. "Do you think I should see him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leona looked at her with a steady gaze. "That's a choice only you can make, Zahara. But if you're asking me, I think Elijah would be grateful to see you. I think he's been waiting for a reason to reach out, for someone to remind him of the family he thought he'd lost forever." Zahara glanced down at the photograph, tracing her finger over Elijah's face, the lines blurred but still filled with that same warm gaze. She felt something stir within her, a desire to bridge the distance, to bring healing where there had only been pain. "I have to try," she murmured, more to herself than to her aunt. Leona nodded, reaching across the table to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Then go, find the answers you need. Just remember, sometimes the truth can hurt, but sometimes it's the only way to set things right." As Zahara left Aunt Leona's house, the photograph tucked safely back into her bag, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just searching for her family's past, she was searching for a way to heal the wounds that had been left untreated for far too long. The sun had shifted higher in the sky, casting a warm light over the familiar streets, and Zahara felt, for the first time, that she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. With each step, she grew more certain of her mission. She would find Uncle Elijah, listen to his side of the story, and return home with the truth. Maybe then, the silent tension that had always hung in the air would begin to fade, and her family could finally find peace. She had no idea what she would discover or how it might change everything she thought she knew, but she was ready to embrace the journey no matter where it led. Zahara arrived in a small town on the edge of the county, following Aunt Leona's directions to Elijah's house. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows that stretched across the quiet streets. She felt her pulse quicken as she neared her uncle's modest home, a small bungalow set back from the road and half hidden by a sprawling magnolia tree. The place felt strangely familiar, as if she'd walked these steps before. Taking a deep breath, she approached the door, her fingers brushing over the photograph tucked safely in her pocket. When she knocked, there was a long pause before footsteps echoed from inside. The door opened to reveal a man who looked older than his years but had a quiet strength about him. Elijah's hair was peppered with grey, and his face was lined, his dark eyes holding an unreadable expression as they met hers. Zahara saw the surprise flicker across his face, a mixture of recognition and disbelief. "You're Zahara," he said finally, his voice low and somewhat rough, as if he hadn't spoken much in a long time. Zahara nodded, her voice coming out in a near whisper. "Yes, I found an old photo of you with my mum and dad." From the outside, the family table looked like any other café, with its warm lights and cozy atmosphere. But inside it held a story far more powerful than its humble walls suggested, a story of love, forgiveness, and the courage to heal. It all began with a young woman named Zahara, who, driven by an unshakable need to understand her family's past, stumbled upon secrets buried by years of pain and regret. Her mother, Rosetta, and uncle Elijah had once shared dreams of opening this very café together, but a falling out had left them estranged, each carrying their own silent grief. When Zahara brought them back together, what began as a tentative reconciliation blossomed into a journey of rediscovery. Their family dinners evolved into family nights where neighbors, friends, and even strangers found comfort, connection, and the warmth of belonging. Through laughter, shared meals, and heartfelt stories, the family table became more than just a place to eat. It became a refuge, a testament to love's power to rebuild what once seemed broken beyond repair. But could this café truly mend the wounds of the past and offer hope to others seeking the same? This is a story about family, resilience, and the courage to start anew. If you believe in the power of forgiveness and the strength of community, join us on this heartfelt journey. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and let us know, what does family mean to you? Zahara sat alone in her bedroom, the quiet hum of the late afternoon filling the space around her. Outside, golden light spilled across the yard, highlighting patches of overgrown grass and a few scattered toys from her childhood, now faded and forgotten. She held an old photograph she'd found by chance in the attic just hours earlier. It showed her mother, Rosetta, and father, Malachi, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. The mystery of that face, combined with the clouded expressions of her parents in the photo, unsettled her deeply. Growing up, Zahara had always known something felt missing in her family. They were close, yes, but there were invisible walls, carefully guarded secrets that no one dared approach. Her parents rarely spoke of their past, and whenever she asked, the air in their small home would grow tense and stifled, Rosetta's gaze distant, as if she were looking through Zahara rather than at her. Yet Zahara's questions lingered, a constant hum beneath the surface of her otherwise routine life. She wondered if she had been the only one to feel these hidden fractures, these invisible scars that had shaped the family she knew. The silence of the room deepened as she stared down at the photograph, her mind swirling with questions. "Who is he?" she murmured, her eyes tracing the stranger's face in the picture. His eyes held a warmth and strength that felt oddly familiar. Something about the way he stood with her parents, close but slightly apart, suggested a mixture of loyalty and distance, as if he had once been deeply rooted in their lives, but had drifted away. Her mother's face looked younger, softer, but there was a hint of sadness around her eyes even back then, as if she had carried a secret weight for years. Zahara wondered what lay behind those eyes, what memories, what regrets she had never been privy to. Her father, Malachi, usually so stoic and reserved, looked almost lost in the photo, his arm around Rosetta, but his gaze cast downward, unfocused. This man beside them seemed like he held a piece of the puzzle that might explain the riddle of her parents' quiet pain. "Zahara!" her mother's voice called from downstairs, sharp and impatient. Startled, Zahara stuffed the photograph into her notebook and hurried downstairs, brushing away the prickling feeling of curiosity with every step. Her mother stood at the bottom, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, as if she could sense what Zahara had been up to. "I asked you to clean the living room," Rosetta said, her voice tinged with that particular edge that made Zahara feel like a child again. "I was just—" Zahara hesitated, glancing back towards the staircase where her notebook lay, feeling its weight like a pull on her mind. "I got distracted." Rosetta's gaze softened, but only for a brief moment. "There are things more important than distractions," she murmured. Zahara detected a flicker of something in her mother's eyes. Fear? Sadness? But the moment passed, and Rosetta turned away, her voice flat again. "Just get to it, please." Zahara watched her mother retreat to the kitchen, the faint sound of running water mingling with the low hum of the refrigerator. Her parents were mysteries, figures who moved through their daily routines, marked by an efficiency and care that Zahara had come to depend on but never fully understood. She sensed an emptiness behind the familiar motions, a guardedness in the way they looked at her and then looked away. That evening, Zahara found herself sitting alone in the living room, the silence punctuated by the soft creak of the floorboards beneath her. Her father was working late, as he often did, and her mother had gone to bed early, looking more tired than usual. Zahara hesitated, glancing over her shoulder to make sure the coast was clear before she pulled out the photograph once more. She stared at the man in the photo, her possible uncle, perhaps, and the faint smile he wore, as if he held stories he'd never had the chance to share. Her thoughts returned to Aunt Leona, her mother's estranged sister, whom she hadn't seen in years but remembered as a vibrant, outspoken woman. Maybe Aunt Leona knew something about this stranger, something that would explain the secrets woven into the fabric of her family's life. She felt a thrill of determination as she made a silent promise to herself. She would seek out Aunt Leona, no matter what. The next day, Zahara waited until her parents had left the house, her mother to her morning errands, her father to work, before she dialed Aunt Leona's number, her heart pounding as the phone rang. "Hello?" came the familiar voice on the other end, warm and a bit hesitant. "Aunt Leona, it's Zahara," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I found something, a photo of Mom and Dad, with someone I don't recognize. I thought you might know who he is." There was a pause, and Zahara could feel her aunt's unease through the phone. When Leona spoke again, her voice was soft, as if treading lightly over fragile ground. "That's Elijah," she finally said, each word slow and careful. "Your uncle. He and your mother. They had a falling out a long time ago." Zahara's heart quickened. "What happened?" Leona sighed, the sound heavy with memories Zahara couldn't see, but could almost feel. "I don't know everything, Zahara. But I do know your mother loved him, once. They were close, like two halves of the same soul. But something tore them apart. Something your mother never wanted to talk about again." As she listened, Zahara's fingers tightened around the phone. She could feel a strange determination building within her, a desire to heal the broken pieces of her family's past, to understand what had gone wrong. "Do you think—" "He talked to me?" Zahara asked, barely daring to hope. Leona hesitated, then replied, "If anyone could get him to open up, it would be you. You've got a courage, Zahara, that runs deep. Just be careful. The past has a way of hurting those who seek it." Zahara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement as she hung up the phone. She looked back at the photograph, her eyes meeting the distant gaze of her uncle. Somewhere out there was a part of her family she had never known, a story left untold that might hold the key to mending the silent fractures in her parents' lives. She made up her mind. She would seek out her uncle, hear his story, and, perhaps, finally understand the invisible threads that had held her family back from the joy and connection they all deserved. The morning sun cast a soft glow over the town as Zahara packed a small bag, glancing out the window to make sure her parents weren't anywhere nearby. She'd told them she'd be out for the day, studying with friends, a half-truth that settled uneasily in her mind. She knew her search for answers might not be what they wanted, but she couldn't keep living in the shadows of their past, constantly feeling the strain of things unsaid. She slipped the photograph into her bag, a silent promise to herself that she wouldn't come back empty-handed. The bus ride to Aunt Leona's house was filled with familiar sights: a corner store, the library she'd frequented as a child, the long row of houses that all looked alike except for tiny differences in color and trim. But this morning it all felt different, as if every turn brought her closer to something unknown. Aunt Leona lived in the quieter part of town, in a small, cozy house tucked behind an old willow tree. The branches swayed in the breeze, casting dappled light over the front steps as Zahara approached. She took a deep breath and knocked, her heart thudding as she waited. The door swung open, and there was Aunt Leona, with her familiar warm smile and those piercing eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Well, if it isn't my niece, come to stir up some old ghosts," Leona said, pulling her into a hug. They sat together at the small, round kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of each of them. Zahara felt a mix of comfort and trepidation, her gaze shifting from her aunt to the mug she held in her hands, unsure how to begin. The photograph lay between them, its worn edges curling up slightly, as if reluctant to reveal its secrets. "So," Aunt Leona began, studying Zahara carefully, "I suppose you've come for the story no one's been willing to tell?" Elijah's gaze softened, though a shadow lingered in his eyes. "You look just like Rosetta did when she was your age. Same spark, same determination in your eyes." They stood in silence for a moment, neither of them quite sure how to proceed. Zahara cleared her throat, breaking the stillness. "I came because, well, there's so much I don't understand. About you, about my family. I thought maybe you could help me understand why things are the way they are." Elijah nodded slowly, stepping aside and motioning her in. The inside of his home was simple but warm, with worn furniture and books piled high on every surface. Zahara felt a wave of comfort as she took a seat on the sofa, feeling like she was in the presence of a part of her family she'd never known existed. He sat across from her, hands clasped, eyes thoughtful. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "There's a lot I need to tell you, things I thought I'd never have the chance to explain. I suppose it's time to set things right, even if it's just between you and me." Zahara watched him, her mind racing with questions, yet she stayed silent, letting him gather his thoughts. "Your mother and I," he began, his voice distant. "We grew up with only each other to depend on. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Rosetta and I shared everything, dreams, fears, everything. But as we grew older, life became complicated. We wanted different things, had different ways of dealing with hardship. He paused, his gaze distant, as if he were looking back through the years. When we were younger, we had a dream. We wanted to open a business together, a small café, a place people could come and feel at home. But after our parents passed, Rosetta felt it was her responsibility to take care of me. She sacrificed her dreams to make sure we both had a roof over our heads and food on the table. I didn't realize back then how much she had given up. Zahara could see the regret in his eyes, a remorse that had clearly haunted him for years. "What happened to the café?" she asked gently. "We never opened it. We tried, but we didn't have enough money, and Rosetta was forced to take on extra work just to keep us going. I was reckless back then, more focused on finding an escape from all the stress. I got involved in things I shouldn't have, thinking I could somehow make our lives better. But I ended up making everything worse." He looked down at his hands, his voice tinged with pain. "I was young, and I made mistakes. I borrowed money from people I shouldn't have trusted, hoping I could somehow make enough to give Rosetta the life she deserved. But when things fell apart, I put her at risk. She had to work even harder to pay off the debts I couldn't repay." Zahara listened, her heart aching as she imagined her mother struggling to support them both, all while carrying the burden of Elijah's choices. She wondered if Rosetta had ever told anyone about this part of her past, or if she had kept it buried, along with the pain it had caused. "Your mother cut ties with me after that," Elijah continued, his voice low. "She felt betrayed, and rightly so. I'd failed her, and in her eyes, I'd abandoned everything we'd once shared. She moved on, started a new life, and I tried to respect that. But it was hard. Every day I missed her, missed the bond we used to have." Zahara felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of sympathy for Elijah and a deep sadness for her mother, who had carried this pain alone for so many years. "Why didn't you try to make things right?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elijah sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of old regrets. "I tried, Zahara, many times. I wrote letters. I tried reaching out. But your mother, she was too hurt, too angry to forgive. Eventually I stopped trying, thinking it was what she wanted. But now I realize that giving up was my biggest mistake. I let the silence grow, let the distance become permanent." They sat in silence, the weight of Elijah's words filling the room. Zahara glanced down at the photograph in her lap, the smiling faces now seeming distant, almost ghostly. She could see the love in her mother's eyes in that photo, the way she had once looked at Elijah with trust and pride. It hurt to think how far they had come from that moment, how life had carved them into separate people, separated by walls of resentment and lost dreams. "Your mother's been hurting too," Zahara said finally, her voice gentle. "I don't think she ever truly let go of what happened between you two. She chose to keep it hidden, to protect herself. But the pain, it's still there." Elijah nodded, his gaze fixed on some point beyond her. "I know, Zahara, and that's my burden to bear, but maybe it's not too late to change things. Maybe it's time for both of us to confront what we've been avoiding all these years." Zahara felt a surge of hope, a tentative feeling that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. She looked at Elijah, feeling a connection to him she hadn't expected. He was a part of her family, a link to a past that she was only beginning to understand. "What would you do if you could talk to her now?" she asked, curious and hopeful. Elijah took a deep breath, his face a mixture of hope and regret. I would tell her I'm sorry. I would tell her that I never meant to hurt her, that I wish I could take it all back. And maybe, if she's willing, I'd ask if we could try again, to build something, even if it's not what we once dreamed of. Zahara nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She knew her mother's pain wouldn't disappear overnight, but maybe this was a start. Maybe opening the door, just a crack, would let enough light in to begin the process of healing. "Would you come with me?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of bravery and trepidation. "To see her?" Elijah hesitated, his face filled with conflicting emotions. "I don't know, Zahara. I've lived so many years thinking I'd never get the chance to see her again. I wouldn't even know what to say." "Just start with the truth," Zahara said gently. "Tell her what you told me. I think she wants to hear it, even if she doesn't know it yet." Elijah met her gaze, a glimmer of hope breaking through the years of regret. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'll try, for her and for you." Zahara felt a rush of relief and pride. She hadn't just found answers to her questions, she'd found a way to bridge the gap between her family's past and present. She stood, reaching out her hand, and Elijah took it, a silent promise passing between them. As they left the house, the photograph tucked safely back in her bag, Zahara felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were taking a step toward healing together, and no matter what happened next, she knew they were finally on the path to bringing her family back together. The drive back to Zahara's house was filled with a quiet tension that weighed on both her and Elijah. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts as the familiar streets came into view. Elijah glanced out the window, visibly nervous, his fingers tapping a quiet rhythm on his leg. Zahara could feel her heart pounding too, though for her it was a mix of excitement and apprehension. She was bringing a piece of the past back to her mother. Whether it would heal or hurt, she wasn't sure. But she was certain it was the right thing to do. When they finally pulled up to her house, Zahara took a deep breath, then reached over to place a reassuring hand on Elijah's shoulder. "We'll take it slow. Just tell her what you told me. It's time." Elijah nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. Together, they stepped out of the car and made their way to the front door. Zahara could see her mother's silhouette moving in the kitchen, the rhythmic motions of preparing lunch visible through the window. Her father, Malachi, was likely still at work, leaving Rosetta alone to face the unexpected arrival. Zahara opened the door, and the familiar scent of her mother's cooking filled the air. She took a step inside, motioning for Elijah to follow her. When Rosetta heard the footsteps, she turned, her face lighting up with a warm smile as she saw her daughter. But the smile faded quickly as her gaze shifted, landing on the figure just behind Zahara. The color drained from Rosetta's face, and for a moment she seemed frozen, unable to move or speak. Her eyes held a mixture of shock, pain, and a flicker of something else, perhaps a longing she had buried long ago. "Elijah," she breathed, barely above a whisper. Elijah took a step forward, his voice soft but resolute. "Rosetta, it's been a long time. I never thought I'd be standing here again." Rosetta's eyes flashed with anger. "You have no right to be here, not after everything that happened." Zahara's heart sank as she watched her mother's face twist with resentment. She had hoped for a softer start, a small opening where they could begin to heal. But the wounds clearly ran deeper than she had imagined. "Mom, please," Zahara interjected, her voice steady but pleading. "Just listen. He's here because I asked him to come. There are things I needed to understand, things you've kept hidden all these years. Don't you think it's time to face them?" Rosetta's expression shifted as she looked at Zahara, a mixture of hurt and confusion etched across her features. She seemed to struggle with the words, caught between her anger and her love for her daughter. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh, her shoulders sagging in reluctant defeat. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. "If you're so determined, then say what you came to say." Elijah looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Rosetta, I know I hurt you. I know that what I did, there are no excuses for it. But I never meant to betray you. I thought I was helping, that I could take on the burden alone and give you a better life. But I was foolish and reckless, and I lost the person I cared about most because of it." Rosetta's face softened, but only slightly. "You didn't just lose me, Elijah. You lost our dreams, our bond. You left me to pick up the pieces without so much as an apology, without any explanation. You shattered everything we had." Her words were sharp, each one hitting like a blow. But Elijah held her gaze, refusing to shy away from the pain he had caused. "You're right. I ran away from the mess I created. I was too ashamed to face you, and I thought, maybe it was better if I disappeared. I thought that if I stayed away, it would hurt you less. But I was wrong. I was a coward." Rosetta's lips trembled, her face a mixture of sorrow and anger. "Years, Elijah. I waited for years, hoping you would come back, hoping you would care enough to make things right. But you never did." Zahara stepped forward, her voice gentle but insistent. "Mom, he's here now. He came because he wants to make things right, because he knows how much you both lost. This isn't just about the past. It's about what happens next." Rosetta's gaze softened as she looked at Zahara, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She seemed to struggle with the weight of her emotions, as if decades of buried hurt and resentment were rising to the surface. She looked back at Elijah, her voice quieter, more vulnerable. "You were my family, Elijah, my only family, and you left me." Elijah's face was etched with regret. "I know, Rosetta, I know I failed you, but if there's any way I can make it up to you, if there's anything I can do to help heal the wounds I caused, please, let me try." They stood in silence, the air thick with unresolved tension and the possibility of forgiveness. Zahara felt her own heart pounding, torn between the pain she saw in her mother's eyes and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point for their family. After what felt like an eternity, Rosetta finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Elijah, but I don't want to carry this anger anymore. I've held on to it for so long, and it's done nothing but poison my life." Elijah nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. "That's all I'm asking for, Rosetta. A chance to let go of the past. We can't change what happened, but maybe we can find a way forward." Rosetta looked at him, a hint of sadness mixed with the faintest glimmer of hope. She nodded, a small, tentative gesture that seemed to signal the beginning of something new. Zahara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, relief flooding through her as she saw the first step toward healing take place before her eyes. In the days that followed, the family found themselves navigating a delicate balance. Elijah became a more regular presence, stopping by the house for short visits, each time growing a little longer, as he and Rosetta slowly began to rebuild a fractured trust. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, of old wounds reopening with a careless word or a sudden memory. But they were trying, and that alone felt like a victory. Zahara watched with a mixture of pride and relief as her parents and Elijah began to share stories, memories of their youth that brought laughter to the room and softened the edges of their past. Each shared story seemed to chip away at the wall of silence that had divided them for so long. One afternoon, Rosetta found Zahara sitting alone on the back porch, the photograph clutched in her hands. She joined her, looking down at the picture of herself and Elijah, young and full of hope. "Thank you, Zahara," Rosetta said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "for bringing him back. I didn't realize how much I missed having my brother in my life until now." Zahara turned to her mother, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I just wanted us to be whole again, Mom. I wanted us to be a real family." Rosetta smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Zahara's face. "You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever have again, a chance to heal. And I promise, from now on, I won't keep secrets from you. You deserve to know where you come from, to know the full story of your family." Zahara nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She knew their journey wasn't over, that there were still scars and memories that would take time to fully heal. But they were on the path now, together, moving forward with a newfound understanding and love that felt stronger than the pain they'd carried for so long. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the yard, Zahara looked down at the photograph one last time before tucking it away. She didn't need it anymore. The real memories, the shared stories, and the love of her family were now etched deeply into her heart. They sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, each of them feeling a sense of peace that had been missing for too long. Zahara leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, her heart full, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for all of them, a chapter defined not by secrets and pain, but by forgiveness, love, and the courage to face their past together. The weeks that followed felt like a season of cautious rebuilding for Zahara's family. With each passing day, Rosetta and Elijah inched closer to a fragile reconciliation, and for the first time in Zahara's life, she felt a sense of hope filling the house. The air seemed lighter, the silences less tense, and although Rosetta and Elijah often treaded carefully around each other, they both seemed committed to moving forward. One Saturday afternoon, Zahara sat at the kitchen table with her father, Malachi. He was reading the newspaper, his quiet presence filling the room with a steady calm that Zahara had always found comforting. She looked at him thoughtfully, wondering how he felt about the new dynamic in their family. He'd been supportive of Elijah's return, but she knew he carried his own share of burdens. Malachi had always been the rock of their family, someone who provided stability and support without ever drawing attention to his own feelings. "Dad," Zahara said softly, breaking the silence. Malachi looked up from his newspaper, his eyes kind but guarded. "Yes, Zahara? How do you feel about all of this? About Uncle Elijah being back?" Zahara asked, her voice gentle. She had never pried into her father's thoughts on the matter, but now, with the changes taking root in their family, she felt it was time. Malachi set the newspaper aside, his expression contemplative. "It's complicated," he admitted, his voice tinged with a weariness Zahara hadn't noticed before. "I know your mother and Elijah had a difficult history. I also know that bringing him back into our lives is a good thing for all of us. But sometimes, Zahara, healing isn't as simple as forgiveness." Zahara felt a pang of sadness as she saw the weight of years in her father's face. "Did you ever feel resentful that Mom never opened up about what happened?" Malachi hesitated, his gaze distant. "At times, yes. I felt like I was on the outside, trying to love someone who was still holding on to a part of herself that I could never reach. Your mother's past was always there, like a shadow, affecting our lives in ways I couldn't control. He looked at Zahara, a soft smile forming. But I accepted it because I love her, and because I knew that, in her own way, she was trying to protect us, especially you. Zahara felt a swell of gratitude for her father's quiet resilience. He had borne the unspoken burdens of their family with grace, understanding that love sometimes required accepting the things we couldn't change. She reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Dad, you're amazing. You've kept us together all these years, even when it must have been hard for you." Malachi's smile deepened, and he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're the amazing one, Zahara. You're the one who's brought us to this point, who's given us a chance to finally be a real family. I couldn't be prouder of you." Just then, the doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Zahara rose to answer it, her heart lifting as she opened the door to find Aunt Leona standing on the porch, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Aunt Leona!" Zahara exclaimed, pulling her aunt into a hug. Leona stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the familiar surroundings. "I thought I'd come by and see how everyone's doing," she said, her tone light but her eyes watchful. She'd been a quiet supporter throughout the family's journey, offering words of wisdom when needed, but also knowing when to step back and let them navigate their own path. Rosetta appeared from the hallway, her face lighting up when she saw her sister. "Leona," she said warmly, pulling her into an embrace. "It's so good to see you." Leona held her close, then stepped back, her gaze lingering on her sister's face. "You look happier, Rosetta, lighter even." Rosetta nodded, a soft smile spreading across her face. "I feel like I'm finally beginning to heal. It's been a long time coming." They all gathered in the living room, settling into the worn but comfortable seats that had borne witness to countless family moments over the years. Elijah arrived shortly after, his expression brightening when he saw Leona. The siblings exchanged a warm greeting, the ease of their connection a testament to the shared history and mutual respect they'd built over the years. As they sat together, Zahara watched her family interact, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. There was a newfound warmth in the room, a softness that hadn't been there before. Her parents and Elijah shared stories, some of them from before she was born, tales of youthful adventures and dreams that had once seemed so close yet had slipped away over time. With each laugh, each shared memory, the rift between Rosetta and Elijah seemed to diminish, replaced by a sense of shared understanding and forgiveness. Leona, ever the observer, finally leaned forward, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "So," she said, glancing between Rosetta and Elijah, "what's next for you two?" Rosetta and Elijah exchanged a look, and for a moment Zahara saw a glimpse of the siblings they must have once been, unbreakable and full of hope. Rosetta turned to her sister, her gaze steady. "We're working on it," she replied. "We're not quite there yet, but we're moving forward." Elijah nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think, after all these years, it's time we start honoring the dreams we once had. Maybe we're not the same people we were back then, but we're still family. That counts for something." The room fell into a comfortable silence, each of them reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Zahara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of gratitude for the resilience and courage her family had shown. They had weathered storms, carried scars, and lost precious years, but they were here now, united by a shared commitment to heal and to love. Leona broke the silence, her voice filled with quiet resolve. Maybe it's time we start a new tradition, something that brings us together, not just to talk about the past, but to create new memories. Zahara's eyes lit up at the idea. What if we start with a family dinner? Once a month, just us. No distractions, no secrets, just a time to be together. Rosetta's smile widened and she nodded in agreement. I'd like that. Maliki placed a hand on Zahara's shoulder, his eyes warm with pride. Then it settled, a new tradition for a new beginning. The rest of the afternoon was filled with laughter and plans, the family brainstorming ideas for their first official family dinner. The atmosphere felt lighter, as if the past had finally loosened its grip, allowing them to imagine a future free from the weight of old sorrows. As the day wore on, Zahara felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had always yearned for a family that was whole, a family where love and trust could replace secrets and silence. And now, as she looked around the room at the faces of the people she loved most, she knew they were closer to that vision than they had ever been before. That evening, when everyone had left and the house had returned to its usual quiet, Rosetta and Zahara sat together on the back porch, the last light of the sunset casting a warm glow over them. "Thank you, Zahara," Rosetta murmured, her voice filled with gratitude. "You were right all along. I needed to face the past, to let go of the things I'd been holding on to. I didn't realize how much they'd been keeping me from truly being here with you and your father." Zahara leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, her heart full. "I just wanted us to be happy, Mum, to have the chance to love each other fully." Rosetta wrapped an arm around her daughter, holding her close. "And we will, Zahara. From now on, that's exactly what we're going to do." As they sat together in the fading light, Zahara felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. They had walked through the fire, faced the ghosts of their past, and emerged stronger, bound by a love that had endured even the darkest of times. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments when old wounds resurfaced, or when forgiveness felt fragile. But they were a family now, truly and fully. And as long as they had each other, Zahara knew they could face anything. The future was uncertain, but for the first time she looked forward to it with a sense of hope. She had brought her family together, and in doing so, she had found a place for herself, a place built on trust, love, and the courage to face whatever came their way, together. As the family dinners became a monthly tradition, Zahara felt as though a new era was unfolding in her life. Each gathering was different, sometimes filled with laughter, sometimes more somber, as they reminisced on memories long left unspoken. Yet every meeting, no matter how raw or joyous, added another layer of connection, another step toward healing. One month, they decided to host the dinner at Uncle Elijah's house. Zahara arrived early to help him prepare, and she found herself admiring the simple, homey touches around his place. She could tell that despite his reserved demeanor, Elijah had taken great care to make his house welcoming and warm. As they worked together in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, Zahara noticed a relaxed ease in Elijah's face, a happiness that she had only begun to see in recent months. "Uncle Elijah, I can't tell you how much these dinners mean to me," Zahara said, glancing over at him. "They've changed everything." Elijah smiled, stirring a pot on the stove. "They've changed a lot for me too, Zahara. I never thought I'd get to share this part of my life with family again. For so long, I convinced myself that I was meant to be alone, that maybe it was better for everyone. But now I realize how wrong I was." Zahara's heart warmed at his words. She could see the transformation in him, as if each gathering had peeled away years of self-imposed isolation. Elijah was reclaiming the family bonds he had once thought lost forever. As they set the table, the doorbell rang, and soon the house was filled with the familiar sounds of family, Rosetta's laughter, Malachi's gentle humor, Aunt Leona's spirited stories. Elijah watched them, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and joy. It was a sight he hadn't thought he'd ever see again, and for Zahara it was a testament to the resilience and courage they had all shown. Dinner was lively, filled with stories that spanned generations and memories that Zahara hadn't heard before. Elijah shared tales from his and Rosetta's youth, painting a picture of their close bond, the adventures they'd had, and the dreams they'd shared. As he spoke, Zahara could see the light in her mother's eyes, a reminder of the girl she had once been, full of dreams and laughter. After dessert, Leona raised her glass, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well," she began, "since we're all here, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room." Everyone looked at her, curious and slightly wary. Leona grinned. "I've heard a little rumor that you two," she said, gesturing at Elijah and Rosetta, "used to have some big dream of opening a café together. Now, I'm not saying it has to happen tomorrow, but—" Zahara's eyes widened, and she turned to her mother and uncle, excitement bubbling inside her. "You never told me about that. A café?" Rosetta and Elijah exchanged glances, both of them caught off guard by the mention of their long-buried dream. Rosetta smiled, a bit sheepishly. "It was a long time ago," she admitted. "Elijah and I wanted to create a place where people could gather, relax, and feel at home. We even had a name picked out. We called it the family table." The room fell into a thoughtful silence as everyone took in the weight of the dream that had once brought the siblings together. Zahara couldn't help but imagine the cafe they might have built, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and the very essence of what their family dinners had come to represent. "Why not bring it back?" Zahara suggested, her voice filled with hope. "You both have come so far. Maybe it's time to make that dream a reality." Elijah looked at his sister, a mixture of longing and apprehension in his eyes. "We're not young anymore, Zahara. Dreams like that, they take time, energy, resources." Rosetta placed a hand on his arm, her expression tender. "Maybe we're older, but we're wiser too. And we have something we didn't have back then, a family willing to support us every step of the way." Malachi, who had been listening quietly, nodded. "I think it's a beautiful idea, and if you need help, you know I'm more than willing." Zahara's heart swelled as she watched her family rally around the idea, each one offering their support in whatever way they could. She could see the hesitation fading from Elijah's face, replaced by a spark of excitement. It was as if they had given him permission to dream again, to believe in the possibility of something good, something lasting. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning, brainstorming, and tentative steps toward making the family table a reality. Rosetta and Elijah spent hours poring over old notes, sketches, and ideas they had once crafted together. Zahara helped too, thrilled to be a part of the journey. The whole family pitched in, from Leona's interior design tips to Malachi's expertise in handling the finances. Even Zahara found ways to contribute, bringing a fresh perspective and her own ideas for the cafe's menu and atmosphere. The journey wasn't without challenges. There were days when the project seemed overwhelming, when the stress of the process reminded Rosetta and Elijah of the hardships that had once driven them apart. But this time they faced the obstacles together, communicating openly, supporting each other, and leaning on the strength of the family they had rebuilt. As the grand opening day approached, excitement buzzed through their home. The café, small and quaint, had come together beautifully. The walls were painted a warm, welcoming color, and the tables were adorned with handmade centerpieces, each one a reminder of the family dinners that had inspired this journey. The night before the opening, the family gathered at the family table for a quiet celebration. They sat around one of the tables, laughing and reminiscing, surrounded by the fruits of their hard work and dreams. Zahara felt a deep sense of pride as she looked around at her family. They had taken something fragile and broken and turned it into a place of love and healing. Rosetta raised her glass, her voice soft and filled with emotion. "I just want to say thank you to all of you, this café. It's not just a place for strangers to gather, it's a place for us, for our family. It's a testament to everything we've been through and to the love that's kept us together." Elijah nodded, his voice choked with gratitude. "I never thought I'd get a second chance, but here we are, standing in a dream I thought I'd lost. Thank you, Zahara, for bringing us back together, for reminding me of what truly matters." Zahara smiled, her heart brimming with happiness. She hadn't set out to change her family's life, but somehow, by seeking the truth, by daring to confront the past, she had helped create a future that none of them could have imagined. The grand opening was a resounding success. People from the community filled the café, each drawn in by the warmth and joy that radiated from the place. They marveled at the decor, the cozy atmosphere, the welcoming smiles of the owners. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives came to support them, each one adding to the feeling that the family table was more than just a café. It was a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Zahara helped serve customers, feeling a surge of pride each time someone complimented the café. She watched as her mother and Elijah worked together, each of them moving with a quiet confidence, a joy that was palpable. They were in their element, fulfilling a dream that had once been shattered, but was now whole and thriving. Later that evening, when the café had emptied out, and only their family remained, they gathered around a table once more, exhausted but deeply content. The room was filled with the gentle hum of shared satisfaction, of a journey completed, and a new chapter just beginning. Rosetta turned to Zahara, her eyes shining with love. "You've given us something we can never repay, Zahara. Because of you, we're finally able to live without the weight of the past." Zahara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging that was deeper and more meaningful than anything she'd ever known. "I didn't do it alone, Mom. We did this together." They held hands around the table, a moment of unity that felt sacred, a promise to carry the strength of their journey with them into the future. As they sat together in the dim light of the family table, Zahara knew that they had done more than just open a café. They had created a place of belonging, a place where love, forgiveness, and family would always find a home. The journey had been long and painful, filled with trials and tears. But they had emerged stronger, bonded by a love that had withstood time, betrayal, and hardship. And as Zahara looked around at her family, she knew they were ready for whatever the future held, together. As the family table became an integral part of the community, it blossomed into something more than any of them had imagined. Each week, familiar faces returned, and strangers found a second home in its welcoming warmth. Families gathered for birthdays, couples met for quiet breakfasts, and old friends rekindled bonds over cups of coffee and homemade pastries. For Zahara, watching her family café fill with laughter and stories felt like watching a dream come to life, a dream she had unknowingly been a part of her entire life. Her mother and Uncle Elijah worked side by side every day, the once faded connection between them now stronger than ever. There was a comfort and understanding in their partnership, an unspoken trust that replaced the years of silence and resentment. Zahara could see the difference in them. Rosetta's laughter came more easily, her face brighter, and Elijah seemed lighter, free of the burdens he'd carried alone for so long. The café had become their shared dream, but it was also a place where they had found each other again, renewed and unbreakable. One evening, as Zahara helped close up, Elijah called her over to sit by him at a small table in the corner. He had a thoughtful look on his face, and Zahara sensed that he had something important to share. "You know, Zahara," he began, his voice low and reflective, "when I first thought about coming back to this family, I didn't think it was possible. I was certain the past was too broken to fix, but now, seeing this place, seeing all of us here together, I'm grateful. I can't thank you enough for bringing us together again." Zahara felt a warmth in her chest, a familiar rush of gratitude for all they had achieved. "I think we all needed it, Uncle Elijah," she replied softly. "I wanted us to heal, but I never imagined it would bring us this much joy." Elijah nodded, a hint of pride in his smile. "It's been a gift, Zahara, and it's one that keeps growing. I've been thinking maybe it's time we find ways to give back. The café has been so much more than just a business for us. Why not make it a place where others can find healing too?" Curious, Zahara leaned in, captivated by the spark of an idea she saw in his eyes. "What do you have in mind?" Elijah hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words. "I was thinking, there are people in this community who could use a place like this, who maybe don't have the support we've found in each other. What if we started hosting community dinners? A night where anyone can come, share a meal, and feel like they belong, even if only for an evening." The idea sent a thrill through Zahara. She could already picture it, a warm, welcoming dinner, strangers gathering around tables, finding comfort and companionship. It felt right, a natural extension of what the family table had become. And she knew her family would be just as enthusiastic. "That's a beautiful idea," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It's exactly what this place is meant for, and I'm sure Mum and Dad would love it." They talked late into the night, brainstorming ways to bring Elijah's vision to life. They imagined long tables filled with people from all walks of life, the rich aroma of food filling the air, and the hum of conversations mingling with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. They decided to call it Family Nights, an open invitation for anyone in the community who needed a place to belong, even if just for a few hours. The following month, they held their first family night. Zahara's heart raced with excitement as she watched people begin to gather at the café. Some faces were familiar, while others were strangers who had wandered in after hearing about the event through word of mouth or a simple flyer. There were young couples, elderly neighbors, single parents with children, and a handful of people who appeared shy, uncertain about what they'd find. Zahara helped her mother arrange the tables into one long, family-style setting, creating a sense of unity and closeness. Rosetta looked radiant, her smile warm and inviting as she welcomed each guest, encouraging them to find a seat and make themselves at home. Malachi moved through the room, engaging everyone with his gentle humor, and Aunt Leona flitted from one end of the table to the other, making sure everyone had enough to eat. As the evening unfolded, Zahara felt an overwhelming sense of joy watching the connections form around her. People who had never met were laughing together, sharing stories and memories as though they were old friends. She saw moments of tenderness and vulnerability, a single mother sighing with relief as someone offered to help with her young child, an elderly man sharing stories of his late wife with a young couple who listened with rapt attention. The room was filled with a warmth that went beyond the flickering candles on the tables. It was a warmth born of shared humanity, of kindness and acceptance. Later, as the night wound down and people began to leave, one of the guests, a woman named Mrs. Thompson, approached Zahara. She was in her 60s, with a gentle smile and a sadness in her eyes that Zahara had noticed throughout the evening. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice trembling slightly. "I haven't had a family dinner in years. My husband passed away some time ago, and my children, well, they're busy with their own lives. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something like this. Thank you for making me feel at home." Zahara's heart swelled, and she reached out, giving Mrs. Thompson's hand a comforting squeeze. "You're always welcome here, Mrs. Thompson. We'd love to see you at every family night." As Mrs. Thompson left, Zahara felt a deep sense of purpose settle within her. The family table had become more than a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a place where people could leave their burdens at the door and find a sense of connection that might have been missing in their lives. She felt grateful for the journey that had brought her family here, a journey that had transformed them and now had the power to reach others. When the last guest had gone and the cafe was quiet again, Rosetta gathered the family in a circle, her eyes filled with pride and gratitude. "Tonight was everything I hoped it would be," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been given so much: love, forgiveness, a second chance. And now being able to share that with others, it feels like everything we went through was for a reason." Malachi put an arm around her shoulders, nodding. "I agree. It's like we've finally found our purpose as a family, and it's something we can all be a part of." Zahara glanced around at her family, her heart brimming with love. She had watched them rebuild themselves piece by piece, each of them facing their past and choosing to move forward with hope. And now, together, they were sharing that hope with the world. As they cleaned up the cafe, Rosetta took Zahara's hand, guiding her to a quiet corner of the room. "I just want you to know, Zahara," she said, her voice soft, "that none of this would have happened without you. Your courage, your willingness to ask questions and push us to confront our past, it's brought us here. You've given us something I didn't think was possible." Zahara felt tears prick her eyes, and she wrapped her arms around her mother in a tight embrace. "I only wanted to understand, but I realize now that all of this, everything we've built, it's so much more than I could have ever imagined." Rosetta smiled, brushing a tear from Zahara's cheek. "It's more than I ever imagined too, and I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become." As they pulled away, Zahara felt a surge of contentment, a feeling that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her journey to uncover her family's past had opened a path to a future filled with purpose, connection, and love. She had found her place not only as a daughter and a niece, but as a part of something larger, something that could bring hope and comfort to others. In the months that followed, family nights grew in popularity, becoming a cherished tradition for the community. People came not just for the food, but for the sense of belonging, for the kindness that greeted them when they walked through the door. Each gathering brought new faces, new stories, and new memories that wove their way into the tapestry of the family table. And as Zahara watched her family thrive, she knew that the love they shared would carry them forward, sustaining them through whatever came next. They had created something truly beautiful, and in doing so, they had found not only each other but also a way to give others the gift of family, friendship, and a place to belong. The future, Zahara realized, was a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with stories of love, resilience, and the courage to heal. And she couldn't wait to see what lay ahead for them all, together. As the family table became more rooted in the lives of its visitors, Zahara and her family found themselves surprised by how much the café had transformed them. Their focus on creating a space for connection had deepened the bonds among them, and each family night seemed to unearth another layer of love and trust that they hadn't realized was possible. With each gathering, Zahara felt her family becoming not only closer but more intentional, each member contributing their own unique presence to the mosaic they had built together. One evening, a few weeks after a particularly lively family night, Aunt Leona invited Zahara to join her for a walk around the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the streets, and Leona's stride was purposeful, her eyes reflecting a quiet excitement. "I'm so proud of what you've done, Zahara," she began as they turned a corner. "You've been the heart of this journey. I know you may not feel it, but without you, this family wouldn't have healed the way it has." Zahara smiled, feeling a familiar mix of pride and gratitude. "I think it was always in us to heal. I just helped bring everyone together." Leona gave her an approving nod. "That's true. But sometimes it takes one person to hold the mirror up, to let others see what they've been missing. You have that gift." They walked in silence for a few moments, watching as neighbors passed by with friendly nods. Zahara had grown up on these streets, but the familiarity felt different now, as if she was seeing everything through new eyes. She felt deeply connected to her family, her community, and her own role in all of it. This was where she belonged, and that certainty filled her with an unexpected sense of peace. When they returned to the café, Zahara noticed a small brown envelope resting on one of the tables. Curious, she picked it up and saw that her name was written on the front in a careful, unfamiliar script. She opened it, and her heart skipped a beat as she read the note inside. "Dear Zahara, thank you for everything you've done. I don't know if you realize just how much your family's kindness has meant to people like me. When I came here, I was at my lowest, feeling invisible and alone. But through family night, I found a place to feel seen, to belong. You and your family have given me hope that kindness still exists in the world. With gratitude, a friend." Zahara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She looked around the empty café, a deep sense of fulfillment washing over her. This wasn't just a place to eat, it was a sanctuary, a place of warmth and acceptance for people from all walks of life, and she had played a part in creating that. Over the next few months, Zahara continued to find small, heartfelt notes left behind by patrons. Each message, some signed and others anonymous, told a story of healing, of finding connection, of feeling accepted. Some were from people grieving loved ones, others from those struggling with loneliness or difficult life transitions. Every note was a reminder of how much the family table had come to mean to the community. One evening, after a busy family night, Zahara and her mother sat at one of the tables, reading through a few of the notes together. Rosetta's eyes filled with tears as she read each word, her hand coming up to her mouth as she took in the depth of gratitude and hope in the messages. "I never imagined that opening up our lives like this would mean so much to others," Rosetta murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Zahara placed a comforting hand on her mother's. You and Uncle Elijah gave them something real, Mom. You gave them a place where they can be themselves, without fear or judgment. Rosetta nodded, brushing away a tear. I've spent so much of my life trying to protect myself from the world, trying to keep my own heart safe. But now I see that sometimes the best way to protect ourselves is to give, to let others in and share our lives. Zahara smiled, feeling the truth of her mother's words settle within her. Her family had once been marked by secrecy and isolation, each member guarding their own pain. But now, by opening their hearts, they had found something far more powerful than protection. They had found healing. As the weeks turned into months, the café grew not only in reputation, but in reach. People from neighboring towns began to attend family nights, drawn by the warmth and sense of belonging that radiated from the family table. Zahara, her parents, and her aunt and uncle poured their hearts into every gathering, each one a labor of love that brought them closer to the community and to each other. Then one day, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A local news station had heard about the café and the impact it was having, and they wanted to feature the family table on a segment about community-driven businesses making a difference. The family was both excited and nervous. While they had never sought out fame or recognition, they knew that the segment could spread their message even further, perhaps inspiring others to create spaces of connection in their own communities. On the day of the interview, Zahara felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as she sat beside her mother, father, and Uncle Elijah, facing the reporter and the bright lights of the camera. The reporter, a warm, encouraging woman named Linda, smiled as she began asking questions. "What inspired you all to start the family table?" Linda asked, glancing around the circle. Elijah leaned forward, his voice steady and heartfelt. "It was a dream my sister and I had when we were young, to create a space where people could come together, feel at home, and find comfort in each other's company. Life took us on different paths for a while, but when we reconnected, we knew it was time to finally make that dream a reality." Rosetta smiled, her hand resting on Zahara's. "And our family, especially Zahara, was the bridge that brought us here. She reminded us that love and connection are worth fighting for, even if the journey is difficult." The reporter looked at Zahara, her eyes kind. "Zahara, it sounds like you were instrumental in bringing everyone together. How do you feel seeing what your family has built?" Zahara took a deep breath, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "I feel incredibly grateful. For a long time, I felt the distance in my family, even if I couldn't understand why. But by seeking the truth and bringing us all together, I realized that we're all stronger than our pasts. This café, it's not just a business. It's a place for everyone who needs a sense of belonging, a reminder that they're not alone." Linda nodded, clearly moved by her words. "It's clear that the family table has had a profound impact, not just on your family, but on everyone who comes here. Thank you for sharing your story." As the interview wrapped up and the crew packed up their equipment, Zahara felt a quiet sense of accomplishment settle over her. She hadn't anticipated how much her family's story would resonate with others, but now she saw the beauty in sharing their journey. The power in letting others see that healing was possible, that love could overcome even the deepest wounds. In the days that followed the broadcast, they received an outpouring of messages, letters, and visitors from all over. Some shared stories of family rifts they were inspired to mend. Others simply wanted to thank them for creating a space that felt like home, even to strangers. The café began to see more patrons than ever, each one drawn by the promise of warmth, acceptance, and community. One night, as they prepared for another family night, Zahara looked around the cafe, feeling a deep sense of contentment. She knew that no matter what lay ahead, her family had built something lasting, something that would continue to touch lives long after the doors closed each night. Her mother and father, her aunt and uncle, they had all become part of a legacy of love and resilience, a legacy she was proud to carry forward. And as the first guests of the evening arrived, filling the family table with laughter and joy, Zahara realized that she, too, had found her purpose. She belonged here, in this cafe, in this family, among these people who had taught her the true meaning of love and belonging. They had begun as a family with fractured hearts and buried secrets, but through forgiveness and courage, they had built a home that welcomed everyone. And Zahara knew, as she opened her arms to greet the new guests, that this was only the beginning of the many beautiful stories yet to unfold at the family table. As the months passed, the family table became more than just a cafe or a gathering place. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of community. People who had once been strangers became friends, sharing pieces of their lives around the tables. Families and individuals found strength in their shared experiences, comforted by the knowledge that they had a place where they truly belonged. One crisp autumn evening, Zahara found herself sitting at a table near the cafe's front window, gazing out at the gathering twilight. The cafe was empty, its chairs stacked neatly, the tables cleaned and set for the next day. Outside, the streetlights cast a warm glow on the sidewalk, illuminating the last few leaves clinging to the branches. Zahara felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, a peace that settled over her like the familiar weight of a cozy blanket. Her mother entered from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she approached Zahara. Rosetta's face was soft, her smile filled with the warmth that Zahara had come to associate with home. Sitting down across from her daughter, Rosetta placed a hand on Zahara's, her expression reflective. "Zahara," she began, her voice gentle, "I want to thank you. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I'll ever be able to tell you enough. You've given me and this family something we never thought we'd have, a chance to heal, a place to belong." Zahara felt a lump form in her throat as she squeezed her mother's hand. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. I just wanted us to be together, to be whole. I never imagined it would become all of this." Rosetta nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You did more than bring us together, Zahara. You showed us that love can mend even the deepest wounds, and I want you to know that no matter where life takes you, this place, this family, will always be here for you." They sat in silence, letting the weight of the moment settle around them, a shared understanding passing between mother and daughter. Zahara realized that the family table had become more than just a dream for her family. It was now a part of who they were, woven into the fabric of their lives. The next family night came quickly, and as guests filled the cafe, Zahara felt the familiar warmth of the gathering. Friends, neighbors, and even new faces joined the long tables, each one a unique part of the community that had blossomed here. She watched as her family moved through the crowd, each of them wearing smiles that radiated the love they had discovered together. Her father and Uncle Elijah worked side by side in the kitchen, laughter echoing as they shared stories and prepared dishes, while Aunt Leona flitted between tables, offering encouragement and laughter to anyone who needed it. At the end of the evening, as the last of the guests departed, Rosetta gathered the family around one of the tables, a look of thoughtful joy on her face. "I know we've all been through so much to get here," she said, her voice strong and steady. "And I couldn't be prouder of what we've created together. But I also know that this journey isn't just for us. It's for everyone who comes through those doors. I think it's time we make family nights a permanent part of this cafe, a tradition that will continue even if we're not here one day." The family nodded in agreement, each of them understanding the significance of her words. They had built something that was meant to last, something that would carry on as a beacon of kindness and connection, regardless of what the future held. As they cleaned up, Zahara felt an immense sense of gratitude for the journey they had all taken together. She knew there would always be challenges ahead, but she felt prepared, anchored by the love and resilience her family had shown. That night, as she left the cafe and walked home beneath the stars, Zahara reflected on the many twists and turns that had led her to this moment. She had started with a simple desire to understand her family, to find a place for herself in the complicated tapestry of their lives. But what she had found was something deeper, a sense of purpose, a place to belong, and a legacy she was proud to be part of. And so, as she looked up at the sky, her heart filled with peace, Zahara knew that the family table was more than just a cafe. It was a story of redemption, of love's power to heal, of finding light even in the darkest of places. And she was ready to carry that story forward into whatever the future might bring.